Thank you, Marcel, for the introduction and also for all the hard work that both you and Varda have been doing, as well as other team members and volunteers in Mosaica to make this happen. And of course, thank you, Jessica and Sarah, for joining us tonight. I know that I've been looking forward to this for a very, very long time. We've talked in previous years, we had planned to do this session and something always happened. So I'm really excited that we're doing it tonight. Well, today for you guys, because you're both in New York. I think it's 1 p.m. to 1 p.m. in New York, 7 here in Barcelona. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. So I'll just echo what Marcel said. Please feel free to leave your cameras on if you'd like to, with no obligation. If you want to keep them off, that's also fine. So this year's session of Sefer is joining the European Days of Jewish Heritage with the theme of dialogue. So today's session is going to be another example of dialogue in a few different ways. So one is obviously Jessica and Sarah will be having a dialogue with each other as a conversation, and with me and with all of us. But also we're looking a little bit at how different forms of literary art are in dialogue with each other. So literature is not just the written word, but also the illustrated word. Both of these young women are illustrators and also authors. And so we want to share some of their, well, they're going to share some of their work with you today. So let me just give a quick introduction of each one, and then I'll hand the floor over to you guys. So in alphabetical order by surname, by last name. Sorry, I've been in Europe for a long time, so now I say surname. Sarah Bible. Sarah Bible is a writer and artist living in Brooklyn. She has a background in fiction writing, illustration, and artist bookmaking. Sarah currently works in publishing as a book cover designer. And to her left or right or up or down, depending on your screen, is Jessica Deutsch. Jessica Deutsch is a New York-based visual artist. Her work explores the pulse of ancient Jewish tradition within contemporary culture. She earned her BFA in illustration from Parsons School of Design, where they both studied together, I recently learned. And her creative practice is a response to curiosities and a longing for meaning to hold on to. So I would like to hand over the floor first to some images. Sorry, I thought I was going to make you speak, but not yet. First, I'm going to share some of their illustrations. So let me see if I can share my screen without messing all of this up. Oops, that means I messed something up. Here we go. Okay, so are you guys seeing my screen right now, I hope? Yes, I'm seeing nodding. Okay, so this is a book from 5 years ago, from 2016, that Sarah Bible designed. This was the original mock-up, and this is actually how we got to know each other. We worked together on this book. She designed it and I edited it with a community of writers that we used to, that we worked with in New York City. So this was first the mock-up, and this was kind of the woodcut. So I just want to share a little bit of the imagery of Sarah's illustration from 2016. And this was a team effort. So we're, here's kind of the inking and the creation of the covers, and then sewing together the books. One of the features of Sarah's work, which you'll see in other images, is kind of the textures of different materials, but I'll let Sarah talk about that. So this is from 2016. And I also want to share, let's see if I can do this. Oops, sorry. This was a lot smoother when I tried it earlier. I also would like to share some of Jessica's work, also from 2016. I hope you guys are seeing this now. This is her illustrated version of the Pirké Avot, which again was also some of her work from 5 years ago. This book was published and is still available for sale as well. I'll let you guys know at the end of the session where you can see some of these different works. And I forgot to say, as this is a dialogue, we do want to include you guys as well. If you have questions, feel free to write them in the chat, and we can read them aloud and discuss them. Or also feel free to, at the end of the session, we'll have an open Q&A, and you can use your voices as well if you'd like to ask questions of our authors and illustrators. So I will now hand the floor over to Sarah to read some of her recent work, and I will show some images of her recent work as well while she's reading. And yeah, so Sarah, go ahead, and it's all yours.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. This is very exciting. Also very cool to see that we were both making those works in the same year. That's really interesting to see. I am just going to read a small piece of writing that's an excerpt from a larger piece. And I'm sure Jessica and I will talk more about this, but as we are both writers and artists, this piece at the moment exists as just writing, but it is actually posted on the Mosaica website as of today. So this is an excerpt from a story called Wilt. So I'll just start off reading that. The day Connor flew from LaGuardia to Colorado Springs was our half day of work. We decided to work in the morning before the heat would become something like a weight, pushing us into the crisping soil, making our breath short. Besides, working in the morning meant that when Corey drove the refrigerated produce truck down the dirt road with Connor in the passenger seat, I could walk slowly from the upper echelon, clean and in a dress, just like I had pictured for a month. In those moments when the heat hit me, I missed Brooklyn. I was exposed in Colorado. I was laid bare before the foothills and plains. I was left wanting to be once again contained by the knowledge that strangers were everywhere, to know that there would be witnesses to my approaching panic attacks, to my vomiting on the streets or subways. On the farm, I could do anything, and no one would even have the chance to ignore me. Here, it was so obvious that the earth didn't care what I did or how I felt. I found no mother in the aspen grove, no mother in the river with its spiders and water snakes, or the meadow by the woods where we once saw a bear crawl from its shadows. Storms gathered and exploded without warning or reason. The land was starved and flooded, then burned for miles and miles, and we were left standing before the mountains with black, blank minds, trying to read messages in the forming clouds. So that's just a short piece from a fiction short story that I'm working on. But the images that Eva is showing right now are images of artist books that I've worked on over the years that involve some amount of text and art, some very short pieces of text and some much longer pieces of text. I want to, so this is what's being shown right now is a piece of like a longer story, kind of like what I just read and what I am imagining that becoming at some point. These bigger projects of combining art and imagery and materials and texture and making the entire thing the piece of art, not just one page of illustrations, but the whole book as being the physical story as well. I'm not sure how much longer this is, but okay, so now I'm currently a book cover designer as my day job. So I have my artistic practice making books, and then I also work on the kind of corporate side of making books now. So these 3 books I included because they happen to be 3 books I've worked on relatively recently that have to do with Judaism. The publisher that I work for publishes a good amount of these books, and that was very interesting to work on as a person who is Jewish, and working on them through the lens of marketplace and publishing.
Thank you, Sarah. Sorry, I don't know if I'm okay. I think I stopped the share. Yeah, thank you very much for explaining those for us, and also for reading your piece. I think now if we can go to Jessica, who also wanted to read a piece, and I'll do the same. I'll show some of Jessica's more recent work while she reads, and then I have some questions for both of you. So I hope that we can get into a bit of a discussion. So I will figure out how to do this screen sharing. And Jessica, it's all yours.
All right. I just want to say real quick, because I got so excited seeing the Michal Dekel book, the one that was formerly called the Turan Children. Yeah, my dad has been obsessed with that book, and it's quite dense. So I only made it through a third of it, but he's going to think it's very cool when I tell him I know who made the cover. So yeah, that was awesome to see, Sarah. All right, hello everyone. I'm Jess, and my work is pretty, I think, explicitly Jewy heavy. With the Pirké Avot piece, that was a bit more of an older work. The stuff we're seeing now is a bit more recent, and I sort of think that the arc of my work has gone from work that's sort of generally Jewish, starting with the Pirké Avot book. That was a book that I made a translation to, but it wasn't my personal writing. Obviously, there's personal connections within the images, but it wasn't my own writing by any means. And once I finished that project, I started doing just more personal pieces about what my actual connection is to Judaism and just what is the experience of being a Jewish woman at this time. So yeah, that's a little book we're seeing here now. It's called The Torah of My Kishkas, Diary of a 20-something Jewess. And it was really just scans of my sketchbook journals. Yeah, and some of it is also not Jewish specific, but it all kind of, I think, including things that aren't just directly related to Judaism, or obviously Judaism gives a sense of just what it's like to be a Jew living in Manhattan at this time. And also during a pandemic, I was living by my parents for about a year, and I started making these little Shabbat Shalom greeting sort of cards that people would share on Instagram. And it was just a cute, fun thing. A lot of my work is also very playful and light. I sell a lot of prints, so it's nice to make things that are kind of interactive, and hopefully those will become a card set. This little book over here is called Pele. It's not an original piece of writing, but it's a piece from the Hasidic teacher Rebbe Nachman, and it's basically all about going on a journey of self-discovery. And this was a self-published little project. It was a lot of fun, and I think it's most exciting to find teachings within Judaism that encourage you to live your truth and experience life in an honest, personal way. So that's that piece over there. And something I'm working on now, I also make ketubas, that's a thing I do, which are Jewish wedding documents. that's kind of what I'm mostly busy with these days, especially this month is apparently peak wedding season. So yeah, something I'm working on now. I'm hoping to make this into like a very short animation piece. I'm a pretty lousy animator, so I've been kind of avoiding that and just focusing on the written part. So I'll share that. It's about family history and connecting to ancestors. It's called Blood Runs Deep. My bones have been so cold this winter. My bones have been freezing. I look at my parents. It's because of you two. Europe? No, the West Coast and the Middle East. No, Europe, they repeat. I forget. My ancestors are hiding in my blood. It's a strange thing to wrap my head around, the idea of freedom and destruction being confused for one another. Since her death about 7 years ago, Mom's mom, Pearl, who we call Bobby, has appeared in my dreams about 5 times. The first time was a week after her soul first left her body. She visited me in Jerusalem. In my dreams, I held her and sobbed. As I rocked her, she scolded me. Gratitude, she repeated. She was naked and we were alone in a room with pink light. With each visit, she softens, sometimes not saying anything at all. She scrolls through my dreamscape. The last time I saw her was last month. She wore dark linen clothing and a headscarf around her hair. She looked peaceful. She was laughing a bit. Her eyes were very dark and set deep in their sockets. When Auschwitz was being liberated, it was unclear to her and her mom if the two of them were about to die. Say Vidoy, her mom begins to recite the prayer before death. Bombs were falling from the sky. No, I will not say Vidoy. I want to see who wins. I imagine her eyes growing big. Maybe they are haunting me because I'm forgetting. My blood is not usually this cold. I'm so tired and I don't want to know war. When we were little, I remember them through hide and seek. I fit in the hamper behind the sunroom and was extremely fast. Once the counter began counting, by my sides, my ancestors and I fled. I trained myself to climb trees, get over my fear of the dark, and be silent in fetus position. Sometimes I wonder if he was training my instincts. I don't really know any of the details to Zadie's story. He jumped off a train en route to a death camp and became a forest fighter. I have only one very clear memory of an interaction with him. I was probably 4 years old, standing on the top edge of the TV couch area. Jump, his arms were wide open. I bend my knees, swing my arms back, and jump. I wonder if it will be my children's blood one day to play hide and seek like their life depends on it. How cold will winter hit them? So, you're German. In 1962, my dad, his sister, and parents arrived in Israel from Romania. First stop was Yerucham. They were there for 2 days, experiencing their first promised land miracle, abundant heat and bananas midwinter. As my dad recalls, some stupid bureaucrat decided their last name would change from Deutsche to Deutsch. My dad's blood type is O, universal blood. Everyone can take and receive from him. Maybe that is where he gets his grounding from. Nothing else makes sense. He calls himself a wandering Jew. His survival strategy must be in his blood. Stay. You will die if you go back and join the army. Stay with me. My dad's father cried for the first time my dad could recall upon visiting him in Cleveland. He moved there when Sapta Khana, his wife, died. My dad knew no English and at age 18 moved to Cleveland, Ohio. When he made the trip from Israel to Ohio, he found great comfort and joy in yet another peculiar food and season pairing, watermelon and snow. I think they were surprised when I expressed interest in a new last name. It's nothing personal, it's just confusing and inaccurate. We aren't German. I think that one day I will change my surname to Shemesh, sun, after the Yerucham heat and LA sunsets. It's sort of pathetic. This winter has been the warmest I can recall. Get a good coat. My mom took me one Sunday night coat shopping because she rightly assumed I would not take care of this on my own. I left with the second to warmest coat in the entire department store. She grew up with year-long sun on the West Coast. She soaked up sunshine so much so that people assumed she wasn't a part of her pale European family. She learned to suck it up quickly on the East Coast. Every now and then she checks in to ask if I'm wearing the coat. I lie. Oh, it's actually not that cold in Brooklyn today. Last night, I dreamt that I was tending to a small school of fish in a bathroom sink. Their eyes were open the entire time, so dream me was certain these were definitely real fish. When I noticed water begin to recede in one sink, I scooped the fish and placed them in another sink, until I realized these sinks all had damaged drains and spouts. These wide-eyed fish had silver scales and gray fins. If these fish were to survive long term, it would entirely depend on consistent faith that hands from above would be their savior. I awoke in panic.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I'm noticing that actually in both of your stories, I mean, we had talked earlier about your connection to family and identity, and particularly Jewish identity through family. And I want to ask you more about that. But I'm also noticing in both of your stories a deep connection to place, to the specific places that people are, not only, well, I don't know, to kind of these specific places. And I wanted to ask you, either or both of you, about that. If you can talk a little bit about this connection to place and family and identity, and how that comes through your writing and your illustrating.
Sarah, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, that's so interesting, Eva, because I also, Jessica, I read your piece like earlier, and I was also finding those connections as well. Family is such a big theme, I think, in both of our work. And coming into this talk, I am I think the one out of the two of us that identifies I'm secular, but I had a father who is Jewish. And it's been something that I am periodically thinking about, how my Jewish heritage has seeped into the work that I create without having been explicitly involved in a very big like Jewish community growing up. And it's fascinating because it does, I see it come up all the time. I don't mean for it to, but I think that it really, really does. And yeah, I think there's something about place that is connected to, I imagine, our family's history, right? Like you even touched on it in the piece that you read, my dad's story, which is his dad's story, which is like his dad, it's like, that is a huge part of what I think about, or it's kind of like always in the background. And you it was explicitly, you talked about it explicitly in your piece. And something that I think about is all of this like overlapping between like time and space. Like my grandfather used to live in New York. We've never lived in New York at the same time. He died when I was 2. But I've heard stories of him being here. And all of these just like generational like layers. And I think that comes through. We both mentioned like Brooklyn in both of our pieces. I think that's really interesting, like where we are in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also like I very much believe in like when I'm like in creative process, a lot of like whatever's being stored in like the subtle body or whatever you want to call it, like that's where it comes out. And I think like with me, Jewish people, we are people like of the book and of stories. And like I think what's also interesting is like with our generation, I think a lot, I guess with like my friend group especially, a lot of us either like have a parent who's an immigrant, or our grandparents like were not from here. And I've been seeing, a lot of writing of people in their like 20s, 30s within New York writing about just like trying to make sense of like, how did we get here? And yeah, it's like this weird obsession and like agitation of wanting to connect to where we're from. And like even that's murky, just like the source. So yeah, and I think for me, writing is very much trying to like, the way I describe it is like combing out knots. It's not necessarily answers, but it's like sifting through things and trying to make sense of time. And that's what's what I love about writing is like, you have like the past meeting the present meeting, future. So it's very much like a sorting ground for me. And like a lot of like within my personal life was, my mom grew up in California, dad from Israel, Romania. And just trying to understand like what home is was such a theme for me. So I think just like culturally, like we're people who are very sensitive to geography, and no matter like what your feelings are, I think it's just something that it's such a Jewish thing.
I'm even thinking of even just sorting through the stories too. I don't know if you've had this experience, but both of my grandparents immigrated here, and even the story of like where they are exactly from there's a murkiness to that. And so then like the stories then removed from them, the stories that my dad told me of them I feel like our whole family is like trying to like sort through things. I absolutely feel that way about writing as well. Then memory comes into play. What are facts? What are memories of facts that are no longer facts anymore? I think that in my own writing, that's why I dub it all as fiction. I think nowadays the term autofiction is very in, and it's fiction, but it's heavily influenced by things that are actually happening to me. But having the ability to couch it in fiction and not nonfiction, I think allows me to deal with some of those uncertainties and kind of like dig into those a bit more. So not having to rely on the fact of the thing, but maybe like the emotional fact of the thing, like the heart of the thing, rather than like the specific like timeline or something like that. But I'm curious how we're also like, we're talking about writing, but we're both visual creators as well. Does your art, like when you're the visual side, like how does it like play with the writing that you do? Are they always connected, or are you doing them separately and they come together sometimes?
Something that I noticed that like I saw like of my practice and your practice was that like besides for the work that you're doing for like the book publishing company, that work, like everything is like the work itself, the way it's presented is also very much like a visual art piece. And well, the piece that I read now, I just have typed up because I'm figuring out how to make it into a visual thing. But like with my personal writing, whenever I share something, it's always handwritten. And I realized that like that very much adds like a certain warmth to it. And I think it would definitely land a lot differently if it was typed up. And sorry, my emails are like beeping. So I think for me, like that's where it sort of meets. And then there's usually like little kind of doodles. And also I only recently like learned that it's like super simple to make your own font. And like with the Pirké Avot book, all of that was handwritten, including I have the Hebrew part in the back. This one we were supposed to like hit publish on the book, and then I decided we need an extra month to include the Hebrew. And that was all like handwritten. I think it would have been really different if I made a font with my handwriting. So they're very much like intertwined, and like with the Pella book that was like very colorful, the text is also like very much a part of the images. I don't do this as much with English, but Hebrew letters are just like super fun to play with, and then like they also carry a lot of meaning to them. So it's just like an extra thing to play with that is super fun for me. Yeah, I've been wanting to translate that work into English, but I'm a bit reluctant to, because that means I'm actually gonna have to like recreate a lot of the artwork. Yeah, do you feel like with your work, it's like, it seems like the meeting is like very natural. Like it doesn't seem like you're going out of your way to try to make the art and the book come together. Like, do you think of them simultaneously?
It's interesting because I think it's changed over time. I think that for a while I kept, so I think for a while I kept them pretty separate, as I was kind of learning about bookmaking, because I kind of didn't, my eyes were really like opened to it at a certain point. And then when I did learn more about it, it felt like the thing to do. It felt really like natural. I always felt when I was writing, almost like very cinematic about it. Like I really felt I wanted to see it playing out, but I didn't actually want to like make film. That wasn't what I was interested in doing. And so the bookmaking, I think, is almost a way of doing that. It becomes this physical experience. And I just was always just like totally enamored by the idea that even when you're reading a book that you like buy in Barnes and Noble, you were having like a physical experience with the text. Anytime you're reading a book, you're holding it, you're feeling it, you're smelling the book. I don't know, just like any of these like things, that it's different like when you're reading on a screen, but when you're interacting with an actual book, you're having this like physical reaction and interaction. And I think that a lot of the books that I ended up making, the writing was created with the visuals in mind. They were kind of happening at the same time, because I would want whatever you were physically like experiencing reading the text, I wanted it to be happening. I wanted to like tease out what could be happening like with you, like in the physical world. But kind of like with this piece that I just read, which is like a newer piece, I kind of like you with the piece that you read, like the plan to make it into like an animation. I have it and I don't have a plan for it yet. So I think that it's not always like automatic, but I think that even when I am just writing, the whole idea of like body and what is happening physically is so big in the writing that it just makes sense that it comes out somehow visually. So yeah, it's something I'm still really, really exploring. And then also, as Eva showed, one of the bigger projects that I worked on a while ago at this point, bigger in the sense that it was the most amount of books that I've ever made, was that project Wealth, which was a grueling process. Like it's hard to make a lot of books. So that's like also something that's a question too, is that part of the idea of like books is that they're reproduced and people can have them. But when I'm making it an art piece, the question of reproduction is just like harder. So that's like a thing I'm exploring too. And I know that you've made a lot of like zines and like these smaller like book projects in the past. So I think that kind of finding a middle ground between that and like handmade art is always an interesting challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before so the Pirké Avot book, I got really lucky. I connected with this like super tiny publisher. Turns out we had like a lot of mutual friends, so it was like a very like easy sort of connection. But before that, like for my thesis show, I was printing like copies of the first chapter myself, and I just remember that being like such a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, zines are super fun. And yeah, well, I was also super like blown away by that cover you had with like the rocks on it. And it's also super nice when like, it seems like for that book, there was only one edition of it probably.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, just like giving like one single book, like your everything, I think is like a very moving experience. Yeah, it's very magic.
Yeah, it is. I think there's I mean it looks like that's what the wedding documents that you're making. Those also seem like that too, like the magic of like an original thing that you're putting out there. Having like prints, you know, is one thing, but really having like your hand on something, even you just saying that the handwriting, the pieces of like writing that you do, I think having your like body be involved with the thing is it makes it really changes it, even if it's like the same words, like the whole experience of it, to have your hand really like on it. And it does seem like there was also in the piece that you read, you did talk a lot about like bodies as well. And I found that interesting. You know, just talking about blood, I know is can mean so many things. I know it means like ancestry and like lineage and stuff like that, but there's something really, you know, of the body about that.
Yeah, I think that's also why like I want to make it into something that moves, you know, is
Yeah.
because of that, trying to like get that energy. Yeah, I was recently talking about it with someone. They're like, but why does it need to be an animation? I was like, well, because like it's about dreams and like my dreams move. And they're like, well, everyone's dreams move. So it's like, it needs to be an animation. The whole thing needs to really, yeah, like become its own sort of like body in a way. I think that's like a really lovely way to explain it the way you did. Yeah.
Well, thank you both. You've gone through all the questions that I had. Actually, there was kind of beautiful transitions. I was going to ask you about writing versus illustrating. I was going to ask you about your publishing experiences, and you guys went there. So thank you for making my job so easy. I'm going to make a quick comment about Mosaica based on something that you said. But before I do, I want to let the audience know that we're going to be opening up to questions from the audience as soon as I finish this little thing that I'm going to say. So if you want to speak out loud, feel free to raise your hand, which I think is if you click on reactions, then there's a raise hand button. They keep moving it around, but that's where it is now. Or if you'd rather write it into the chat and I can read it aloud and our authors, illustrators can respond. But yes, the thing I wanted to say is, Jessica, you mentioned, or I think Sarah mentioned that Jessica makes or used to make zines. And actually that is the origins of Mosaica. So Mosaica is now, I'm going to get this wrong, 12 years old. Marcel, did I say it right? Yes. Okay. 12 years old. And it's now, you know, we're in our 6th session of the Barcelona Jewish Book Festival. We do about 1 million events every day, as Varda can attest to because she's in charge of them. We have the magazine, which we've just published a new hard copy edition. We have our website, we do Jewish tours, we have gastronomy, we have et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But originally it was a zine. It was a zine that a few contributors, you know, a few friends got together and said, hey, why don't we write things about Jewish culture that aren't being written here in Barcelona? And they would write them, print them out, staple them together and hand them out. And that was the beginning of Mosaica, which then grew into a magazine and then grew into this Jewish cultural platform. So we're very proud of that history. And I love that you also started kind of with zines and are now exploring all these different things. And I'm very excited to see the animation. I also agree that dreams should move. I don't know, dreams move. But yes, so I'm going to stop talking now. If anybody else would like to ask a question to either of our guests, please feel free. Yes, Evangelos.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. Thank you both for coming. It's factually accurate what Eva was saying, that we were looking forward to having you also from previous years. She was not saying that just to be nice, even though she's the nicest person possible. So I would like to ask the both of you about the stereotype, like the archetypal images of that come with the writer as an architect versus writer as a gardener, the planning versus the loose flow of creativity, because you both combine so much stuff. I mean, Sarah's mixed media and working with hardware, I can only imagine how much planning that requires. And then Jess, for example, for the Pirké Avot, like the educator's guide is the most complete educator's guide I have seen for any comic book. So I can only imagine the amount of work it must have taken. But then on the visual side, you seem to be so free and creative, and I would like to know how you combine these two aspects of creativity.
Do you want to go first, Jessica?
Sure. Well, like I think with my process, like different aspects come like they have their own seasons. I would definitely say that I, in certain ways, am a stereotypical, a little bit disorganized, flowy art person. But Sarah, you, I guess you could also maybe comment on this, but I'd say like our school was like, I mean, we didn't study anything business related, but there was a certain sort of like practical approach to a lot of what we did. And it's a very fast paced environment. So you learn how to make a lot of things and make a lot of things fairly fast. I think I enjoy taking my time a bit more now than in school, but you kind of learn that you could just like balance those different headspaces. And I think for me, like summertime, I like to be super busy. I like painting, doing a lot of personal projects, and it's starting to get like, now happens to be like a gorgeous sunny day, but it started to get cold out. So I like to go to bed really early, and I'm just kind of like doing the work that needs to be done and a little less of like personal project time. So yeah, it comes in waves. Yeah. How does it work for you, Sarah?
Well, yeah, I think now a lot of my time is focused on the art that I do for these like commercial book covers, which is very different. And that's when the Parsons rigor really like comes in, and the being able to be creative but like organized is just like a necessity. I think with my personal work, it's a lot of like collecting of things. I think that I feel like I'm collecting like images and like thoughts and things like that regularly, to then be able to, when I get further along with an idea, I can actually start like planning it out, because it does take actual planning out. It's true when I'm doing stuff with like materials, that there are a lot of logistical things there, but I think the kind of like looser stuff happens at the very beginning when I'm just kind of going through life, like collecting ideas. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another hand and a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to read one question in the chat, which is from Gemma Esteva. She says, hello, it's beautiful pictures. Where can I see and buy this book? In any shop or bibliothèque, particularly in Barcelona, because she lives here in Barcelona. I'm going to put in the chat, I'm going to put some links to each of our guests' personal websites, and then also some links of where you can buy some of the books that they have done that we've been showing today, at least online. I'm not sure, I assume everything ships to Barcelona, but I'm not 100% sure. So yes, and then Flora had her hand up, and then I'll read the other the other questions. So Flora, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah and Jessica. Full disclosure, I'm actually down the corridor from Marcel because I live with him. Hi, Marcel. I just have a question, perhaps more directed to Jessica, but I'd love to hear both your answers. In the description, there was a mention that perhaps Jessica, if I'm getting it right, approaches this in partially a religious way. Am I getting this correct? Yeah. And I just wondered how religiosity or spirituality relates to your creative process or the illustration of, the religious texts. I'd be really interested to hear about that.
Happy to jump in. I'm gonna try to do my best to answer the question. Well, I also like grew up as like one of those like really weird kids that was just like weirdly like very into Judaism and religious studies. I had this one like really kind-hearted teacher when I was young, and he was like this very religious man, and we were all just like all the kids. He was sort of had this like imagine like a Jewish Santa sort of presence, just like kind of like a sweet grandfather teaching us. And we were all like terrible students, but he was like just super kind to all of us. And I just was lucky to have this like positive experience of like what a Jewish adult can be. So I got like very into it. So yeah, for a lot of my life, like religion and like Jewish practice was like my life, like it wasn't like separate things. I also spent time studying and like different like I went to an all-women seminary for a year and like studied in other maybe you've heard of Pardes. It's this egalitarian yeshiva in Jerusalem. So like that was a lot of like young adult life also for me, just like being in these spaces where religious life and your life outside of that like were all in one. I think when I was younger, a lot of my work was very, I still make work that's very clearly Judaica, but I think it's been able to also appear in my work, certain religious things in a bit more of a subtle way where you'd have to read the explanation to like see and understand how like that arrived. Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it is like the way I see religious practice and creativity is just like relationships and like making them unique ones, if that makes sense, and personal. So I think that's like where my work kind of shifted from just making like very apparent, paintings of like the Western Wall and stuff like that to making these detailed ink drawings of, a lot of them are of my sister, and they like express different teachings and it's like less apparent, but it was like filtered through personal experiences. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. There are two more questions in the chat and I'm seeing another hand up. So I'll do one in the chat and then one hand up and then the last one in the chat. And then I think we'll have to close around 8:15 Barcelona time, which should be 2:15 New York time, because the next session will be at 8:20. I invite you to join us for the next session as well. It will be in, I believe, Spanish or Catalan? Spanish. It'll be in Spanish, and it's about the history of the book in what we may know in English as Ladino, which is called Judeo-Español, which is like Jewish Spanish. Which is also going to be a really interesting session. I invite you to join us. So Jeanette asked, the word sensory came to me several times listening to both of you, although neither of you mentioned this specifically. Is this an apt word or idea for your work?
I guess I'll start. Yes, I think that I got stuck using the word physically, but I think sensory is just like another, it is in line with the same thing. I think the senses are a huge part of the work that I make. I think I was always attracted to illustration work that I feel like it almost like falls into a fine arts category, but those categories kind of like break down in my mind, where you are experiencing something not just with your eyes, but in your other senses, like you're able to touch something, you're able to hear something while also seeing it. And books can do that in a more condensed space instead of walking to like a gallery space where you're like an interactive like gallery. Like a book in and of itself is like an interactive gallery. So that's how I've always thought of it. And a lot of the books that I work on involve you like needing to like do something like really explicitly like interact with the book. So you're like pulling apart twine to look at some of the words, or you're flipping the page like multiple times, or in some of the images that Eva showed, I've like stained the pages with like wine or coffee or tea or dirt, and so hopefully it smells like something. So the senses are really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add to that, but I'm taking note that that's like another word to include in, the artist statement. But yeah, I think like most people who are making art are definitely like, that is the goal, like helping someone like feel a way, and I think that's especially like very apparent with Sarah's work. And like, I don't remember specific pieces, but I remember like the quality of your work always like having like a certain warmth to it that like two-dimensional pieces, like that's just like not always the goal, to have like a clear like this feels like something. Yeah, so adding sensory to my bio.
Wonderful. And now we have a question from Deborah Beigel, who I'm guessing
hi.
you're related to one of our authors.
Yes, I am. It's a matter of the background, lineage, the tapping into one's roots, that, that's important in family. I spent the last 10 years doing the ancestry background, all the way to actually Sepharad and Verona before we wind up in Poland. The family from Poland was in art, in craft. We've been at this for a long while. Sarah's grandfather, Leon, and the family there was engaged in craft of wood, which is very strong in the family. But also for Judaica, we come from a lineage of rabbis. That's, the name, we're the only Jewish Bibels in the world, which is remarkable. I mean, I did this whole study there, but they're, the Germanic ones, but we're the only Jews. So traveling from Sepharad to France to Holland, through across Germany into Poland, we were related to the Torah, to the Bible. But the family merged into artists, the begleiters, into craftsmen, generations upon generations upon generations. This is a strong lineage that occurs in many in our family, and I know in others, musicians this way as well. So your dreams, your predilections, it goes way back. And it's interesting that, we can talk Jungian aspects, but it's there. Believe me, it's there. So that was just point of information. And this was very interesting. It's also, you may have been, you kind of worked together for a while, at least, the the same area, the same study places, that your art has a certain similarity to it, and that's interesting as well. Anyway, just point of information. That's all.
I should say my grandfather, yes, Leon Bible is an artist, and he was a huge influence, like in my life as well. And like we were talking about before, just like these like layers of time and place. And he died when I was 2, so I don't really remember him, but just all of it like seeps into everything.
Yes, it does. It's there. It's in the genes and it's outside the genes. So anyway, that's Sarah's work is
yes.
So
Deborah's also an artist. It's a family.
Yeah, the family's there, and she's already in the archives. So anyway, it was a very interesting presentation, by the way, and it's interesting tapping into Catalonia.
Well, thank you. We have one last question from the chat, and it initially mentions Jessica, but it has been made clear to me that the question is for both of you. The question is, Jessica spoke also about, the question is from Hanan. Jessica spoke also about Hebrew letters. Hebrew is written from right to left, whereas English and European languages are written from left to right. How do you cope with that change of direction? How is it manifested in an illustrator's mind? Does it change the concept, the thinking, the work process, etc.? And I'll give you guys 5 minutes total to respond, and then we're going to have to let the next session get started. So.
I guess I'll jump in, but yeah, the way I naturally think is like from right to left. I don't know if you have a preferred way of thinking, but like that's sort of my gut way of like movement, and that happens to be like the way of Hebrew letters. Sort of like a weird thing, but that's just like my default of direction. But yeah, it makes things super difficult actually. And I tend to, if I make a piece in Hebrew, like I have this one book, the one that's in color, like I said before, a big reason why I haven't come out with an English version is because it would like change. I'd have to like recreate a lot of the artwork. And also with the Pirké Avot book, I think I spent about 2 days attempting to begin putting it in Hebrew. And because the text is so in like a part of the art, and it's not just like text image, it's all intertwined. Yeah, I just realized like, oh, this is gonna be like a lot bigger. Like I'm remaking this book. So I told myself like, unless someone guarantees they're gonna buy like 1 million of them, like I just don't have like the strength to do that, especially because the project took like so many years to complete in one language. So I tend to alternate, and like certain things I've started actually like writing little poems in Hebrew, and I realized that like it just like wouldn't mean as much to me in English. So it doesn't like, every now and then if someone wants to know what something means, like I'm happy to share translations, but I think language lands very differently depending on what language you use. So I kind of jump back and forth because it's really difficult. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, we didn't even get into language. That's for another talk, but I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, in previous sessions of previous editions of Sefer, we've had some tables specifically about translation and kind of what this means, and also being in Barcelona. This is a bilingual city, which I would say is a trilingual city now, because as you're seeing, we're having this session in English, and now I hear more English in the street than Catalan, depending on where I am. And then, of course, there are all of the other languages that exist here. So. Yes, I agree with the commenter who says another session, another talk, please. So yeah, let's, we hope to invite you back very soon. And I think I'm going to close today's session. Thank you both for joining us and for sharing all of your works and your thoughts with us. And thank you to the audience for being here with us. And again, thank you especially to the Mosaica team for making this happen. Our next session is at 8:20 Barcelona time, which is in 13 minutes according to my clock. It's the same Zoom link, I think. Is that right? No, it's not the same Zoom link. Don't listen to what I'm saying. But for those of you who don't have the Sefer program, in case you only came for this session, let me, oops. Here is the program for the rest of Sefer, which is going on until Sunday. Some of our sessions are live in Barcelona and some of them are online on Zoom like this one. Tomorrow at the same time, we're having another English language session for those of you who are interested in English language sessions. And yeah, thank you again, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for coming.